Mr. Roberts, could you tell us about your memories of the calciner at Geevor Tin Mine?
From the Vanners, it was come across the bridge to the calciner, where it was spread on the floor to dry it a bit before it went in a cone to feed the plate below. In the tin floors, there was the mechanism for drying the tin ore that consisted of a shafting with a crown wheel, and it was driven very, very slowly, and then it went up through the roof into the furnaces. The furnaces was a brick bed, and the container on the top was cone shaped. They fed the centre of the brick wheel. The fire was under the bed of the tin, and steel knives was coming down, each pointing a little bit to the edge of the wheel. As it went around, each knife pushed the tin ore out a little bit towards the end. The fire was burning out the sulphur and arsenic. Sometimes the tin ore would hang up in the cone, and then the fumes, instead of going out, filled the room, and they used to have a shovel in the doorway so that they could make a dive for the shovel and just give them a bit of poke to stop the fumes coming up, because sulphur fumes are deadly. Because I suppose if anybody wanted to go, they need a little bit of arsenic too. When it was pushed over from the real edge of the bed, it went in a place where it was a shutter was pulled up, and it was left out twice a shift. Then a boy would run it over the tables to separate the tin from the waste.
Was that the shaking tables?
Well, it was a Wilford table. You would run on that in the cool classifier first, and with the upward current of water, it would blow the fine and the lighter stuff up over the top of the, and then the heaviest would drop against the, and he put it right. I had half shift for that, and the fine then used to go in the bottle. You'd see some of the fumes going out through the tailings when it was being bottled. And he said that one of the operators of the calciner wasn't as good as he ought to have been, leaving little jobs for his partner. So his partner one Saturday night, before he left work from the afternoon shift, tied a bit of string around the poker, and when he come next morning, the string was there. If he put the poker in the fire, it would have burned. He swore to the deepest that he done it, but when he seen the bit of string past the point of the poker, he had to climb down. And another one fellow went home one Sunday morning. When he come next time, his partner said to him, "Where's he till yesterday?" He said, "I left it this morning." "No, you didn't," says the fella. He said, "Today is Monday." He lived by himself, and he slept through Saturday and Sunday and Sunday night. When the tin was, after it was burnt, it had a lovely, I can say, orangey colour. I had some home for a long time, and I put in an electric light bulb to the insides out, and then filled it with. I was in my house one day, and I gave him a crack, and I knocked him off the bench. And had been a cure and it was done for the museum out here.
Was the calciner ever allowed to go out, or was it continually running?
Oh, the fire was kept on all the time. You see the old calciner down there. It is difficult to explain because it's in really three parts. Going in, being dried, and the knives would push each lot of the stuff away towards the end. Then when they leave it out through the shutter, you had to cool before you could treat it. That was a boy's job.
How did they cool the tin? Was it just left to cool down naturally, or did they?
Oh, yeah, cool down. But if we had it was in a bit of a hurry, you sprinkled hot water over them before the bosses come around. The tin was a lovely orangey colour. That's all I know.
Was someone responsible for keeping the fire going in the calciner?
Oh, he was the man there all the time. See, he had to fill up the coal with stuff and make sure it's going through.
Who was responsible for putting the tin, the ore, into the calciner? Whose job was that?
Oh, it was a fellow. He had a wheelbarrow and wheeled it from the vanners was pulled twice a shift with a rake into a box, and then with a wheelbarrow dumped out through a hole in the side of the building and into a tram. And he was all decurvous down here. Down here, I mean, still in Cornwall. In over Cornwall, he used to wheel a tram, and in this year the bridge is gone. But it was a bridge for a tram to run on, and you push it on and dump, and then the calciner man would spread it over the floor. When the cone went through, sometimes it'd just leave a little hole about 2 or 3 inches across where the stuff was jammed and allow the fumes come out. And they'd make a dive in with handkerchief over your mouth and nose to keep the fumes away. Hold your breath, run in, give them a push, and then wait until it cleared a bit, and then fill them up again, scrape them all out, and keep it full. If you kept it full, no fumes could come up. You want the.
Can you tell me about the arsenic, Bill?
The arsenic, I never done it, but the boys used to tie no piece of bell shag around cover their nose and the mouth while they enter in the flues. Nobody liked to go there very much, but you had to. In their days, there was no union there. Several were fired to refusing to go there.
Was it always young boys that did the job of going in?
Well, we were teenagers, and for a little bit extra, you do anything. We were happy. Make no mistake about that. You had a bob extra in your pay packet. Well, I didn't like it. You was a rich man. When I started work, I had a shilling a day, 6 bob a week. 18 getting 1 and 9pence.
Mr. Roberts, can you tell me about the flotation tanks at Geevor? Where did they come from?
Right, from the vanner boxes, it was wheeled to the float. So many barrels would be a batch, and it was 4 batches a day. That was a normal day's work, and it was thrown in, some water inserted in the box, if you could mind call it, and added to this was sulfuric acid, all by measure, xanthate powder. That was a yellow powder used to come from Germany, and so much of that. And then the oils was flotation oil, creosote, and pine oil. Each of these ingredients had a purpose. The acid would clean the grains of tin, or tin and waste, and then the pine oil and flotation oil would attach themselves to the grain of waste, sulfur and that, and the pine oil that was put in would make bubbles. It was air turned on, coming up through the bottom gently, blow the sulfur over the top of the float. Tin, in those days, tin was the only amalgam that went to the bottom. The rest came over with the oils. When the air was on, well, like a child blowing bubbles, it would finish up like, and then you lead that out into a settling tank to go to the tin floors to be treated as for the get the waste out for the save the tin. The floor was, it would take an hour and a half to float it.
Do you know where Geevor had the tanks from?
The first one was from Trevains mine. I made one, copied it for down the bottom. We started with one, and then they put on two because to take the finer stuff. It didn't alter the colour of the, not like the calciner did. That was when the stuff went in the pits. We had half a shift to throw it out, where it went down tin floors through launders. It had an elevator there, a rubber belt with cups on it. And the darn thing would, when it was getting done, there you are, bang, all go to tear in pieces.
What was the fuel that they used for the calciner?
Coal.
Do you know where it came from?
No, that was giving away secrets. In their days, it didn't know what the right end was doing. The new plant that's there now, the long steps farther down, and there is a container for the chute for the coal. It was two fires, and in the middle was another door that you could open to see how things was working, give them a poke, or like you would with a coal fire in the home. Where the coal came from, I don't know. We were happy, though we worked hard, we were happy. Christmas time carols, lovely. Worked hard and played hard. I remember seeing them, with the cloths over their mouths and the side of the flue all open up. But not long before the war, they had another party, another experiment. David, do remember, seeing where they've been. We was told that they was going to make silk stockings here. That's how close he was. They mixed them up with the coal dust and put in to burn. And there's a pile of sulfur there then. And the boys, my cousins used to work here. They refused, if you refused, you was fired. But it wasn't a success, and they shut down. And then what came off the floats contained copper. And if you look at the back of tin floors, you'll see the copper tanks here. The stuff was burnt, but it was this. We couldn't keep gratings in. We put a new grating in to catch bits of pilf from one thing or another, and they wouldn't say any. the copper would eat away the grating, and we had a copper shovel, especially made to bruise up. It would go hard as a paving stones of metal, and bring up and put them through, and he'd run in the succession of tanks and settle, and it'd be blue. That wasn't a success. They stopped that. See, when you burn it, the residue that come off that when you're floating the tin, it would run from one tank to another. You'd leave it settle for so long, and then it drain off. When they stopped ordering coal, we thought there was something gone wrong. Used up all was there to burn them. Don't know whether it's all gone though. The residue used to be caught in two big pits down towards the scholars, and we had about a couple of quid to Ed and four of us. I had a new one there. The chain broke and come over, and I broke my ankle. And these things happen. If I knew what I know then, what I know now, I'd have sting them, because it wasn't done right.
When your ankle was broken, did you have time off work?
I wasn't paid. I had to stay home. It was in plaster. It looked well, white plaster with a red slime. But I enjoyed it. Though we worked hard, we were happy. I felt that somebody was watching me. Whether it was one of my old bosses or no, I don't know. But I was creepy. Whether it was Ned, Ben Bottrell, or Mr. Collins. No matter where I went, I had that feeling that whoever it was watching me. The good old days. Ben Bottrell, if you done something wrong, he used to say, "You young varmint, you do that again, I'll spill you half a shift." You know what I mean, suppose? And Ned, his saying on fine tin was, "Treat fine tin like you would a woman, gently and firmly." They knew their job. That's the thing. They knew what they were doing and did it, and knew what it was for. They learned their trade. If you could call tin dressing a trade, is skill and know-how, and that's all trade, sir.
Well, basically my day would start from a dry, picking up my lamp in the morning, changing, getting ready to go underground, and then come out, walk down through Victory Shaft Bank, and then wait for my cage. I worked on 13 level bill load, which was actually over to Weeks. So 9 times out of 10 I would actually go down to Weeks side, which there was a van that would actually take a Geevor across to Weeks, which is about half a mile away from here, and then wait over there on the shaft bank, wait for the cage to drop the miners down, say 11, 12, 13, whatever. It was 14 man cage. So I would go down my partner to 13, and whichever other miners are working on that level that day. And then when we got down 13 level, cage man would open the door for us. We'd go out onto the station. The station was quite a wide area. It's the only place really with electric lights. And then of course on with the cap lamp. And then if we had any explosive to carry in from a previous day, the explosive was brought down on the day you ordered it. But you will always a day in advance for your explosive. So we had little red boxes on track on the stations where your explosive was stored overnight. So if you had explosive to carry in, open a box up, pick up a couple boxes of explosive, whatever. Any drill steels there that was sent up the night before to be sharpened would be there for you as well. So if you was lucky, you might have a little flatbed that actually ran on the track. So some days you might have a dandy, other times you never. So if you never, you carried them in, of course, to your workplace. But we was quite lucky in respects, because we just walked off a station, turned to the right, then through a set of rubber doors, and about 200 yards down the tunnel was actually bill load. So once we got down to bill load, we had our mossel set. That's where you have your lunch, or your mossel we used to call. and then you would drop your bags down, store your explosive away, put your debts in the box, because in the days when I was machining you had to carry your own debts as well, but later on you actually used to bring them down with you, but they were sent down in previous years to that. So then you store your debts, store your explosive in the respective boxes. These were stored so far apart, of course, I think it was 100 feet, something like that, in the level, and then take your coat off and then walk into the level. Now access into the stope, and the stope is 100 feet apart, so bill load is 13 level. You've got this bill load now that will actually run from 13 up to 12, and then it could go up to 11, all depends on the depth of the load. I mean, some of them were hundreds of feet. So you walk in through your level to your ladder. Your ladder gained access into the stope, was about a 20-foot ladder. So you and your partner now climb up the stope. Normally the first one would carry a pinch bar. Because of the previous day's blast, you might have walls coming off or a bit of loose rock on the roof or whatever, so you really just to look after your own safety. And then either me or Dennis would go up in front, all depends who happened to climb the ladder first, and then walk up through the stope. Now the stope was actually set at an elevation of about 30 degrees, I guess. So you've got this elevation that you're actually climbing up through, and what you're climbing over, just to give you some idea, is a broken rock from a previous blast. So as you walk up over, of course, the floor underneath your feet is a bit rough to say the least. So as you climb up through the stope, now the stope is roughly about a metre wide. It wasn't much wider than that because of the smallness of the loads that you're actually chasing. I think bill load was about, wasn't more about 10-12 inch load, that's all it was. So the waste rock each side is what we call dates. We don't want that, so we take out less width to keep our grades up, basically. So then when we climb up through the stope, we get to where Dennis's machine is, and he worked the back of the stope and I work the bottom of the stope. So in theory you are working as a pair, you are partners, and you are responsible for each other's safety while you're down there. In respects, you could in a stope, because of the elevation and the 100 foot, your stope could be 130, 140 feet long if it's flat. Could be working 70, 80 feet apart. You know, you really don't see anybody apart from going in the morning, and then when you blast at the end of the day, you know your partner's up there somewhere. So we would climb up through then, barring down as you go, just to make it safe. We didn't water down because I think bill load was quite damp, so we didn't bother with the water. Watering is just really to suppress the dust. And then you got through, might be a bit gassy from previous day's blast, you know, from the explosive. And then as you get up to where Dennis's gear was up the back, and his gear actually consisted of 2 8 or 10 foot boards, a couple 3 acro bars, his machine, hoses, oil bottle, and that's basically all your gear was. So what we would do is then we would rig Dennis in, because our job was actually to drill into the roof above our head, and it's basically quite simple. All you do is, if you drill into the roof today and you collapse that with the explosive, that roof tomorrow becomes your floor. So you're actually creating your own floor of broken rock every day to stand on. So as we go up through now, and as we start to rig Dennis in, we put acro across the back. We needed about 7'6" of headroom, so you rig that in now about 7'6" from the roof of the stope. And the stope was actually divided into what we call benches, and these are about 10 foot long. So to give you some idea, it's really just like looking up under an inverted staircase. That's all it is. So if you go under the stairs and look up, you can see the steps coming down. The stope is exactly like that, but our steps, in respect, or our benches, were either 10, 12 feet long, could be 15 feet long, but you tried to keep them not too much length in them. And then when we went out and rigged his machine in, we would come down through, join his hoses up. He had 2 hoses, compressed air and water, to his machine. And then as we got down to where my gear was stored from the previous day, we would then put an acro in for me, rig in my machine by using the boards, and then stand the machine up. You had your drill seals, of course, as well there. And then we would climb down, and our miners had different ways of doing it, but the way that we found was that by actually rigging us both in to start off the day and then coming down, by now is about 10:15 to 8, because you go underground about 7, and then it's now about 7:45, so you had a quick cup of tea, you're wet through with sweat already because the temperatures you're working in is very hot, very humid, and of course your head now might start to go around as well because of the gassiness of the ground that you're walking over. You're disturbing all the gas from the previous day's blasting. So then once we had a quick cup of tea, fag maybe, or sandwich, then Dennis would climb up through the stope. We turn the air and water on in the tunnel, because the hoses that come from your machine actually come right down through your stope into 13 level. They're connected to the main air line and the main water line. So we turn those on. We've got 4 hoses coming up off, of course. We've got 2 water, 2 compressed air, 1 to his machine, 1 to mine. And then when we got up through, Dennis would climb up in front of me. He would start drilling, I would start drilling. And the way that we used to do it was, I would drill till about 12:30, So you start drilling about 8 o'clock, and really some more holes, more money. The more holes you drill, the more money you make, because the more ground you break. And the method of payment was every 20 working days our stope was measured along with all the rest of the machine men on the mine, and the more ground you broke, and in my day it was fathoms, we were actually paid by fathomage. Later on it became meters, of course, because of the metric system. And then all you basically do is then you drill as many holes as you can. So you might drill 3 benches of a day, you might only drill 2. It all depends on the hardness of the rock and how things went. And we always found that the more holes you drill, the easier the day was. The less holes you drill, you've had a hell of a hard day, but you haven't produced so much ground. But that's the nature of the job. And then once I had finished drilling at my watch about 12:30, I would come down through the stope. I would turn my air and water off at my machine, and then I would come down through the stope, turn them off in the level, go back to the mossel seat. Again, by now you're actually caked in a fine layer of pebble dashing over your face, your arms, all your exposed skin, because of course you're drilling into the roof and all this is coming down on you. You're wet through, so again, maybe change the t-shirt, just make it a bit more comfortable. Another quick sandwich, another cup of tea, go to the explosive box, pick up what explosive I need, pick up my debts, whatever I need, count out the holes that I've drilled. So if I need 24 debts, I carry up 24, and then I climb up through the stope. Some miners did use wood stick as well, but I found for what they actually saved you on your explosive, because we had to buy our explosive, what we actually saved on by using wood stick, I didn't think it was really worth the hassle of actually carrying wood stick up a stope. And I'd rather break a hole cleanly than by trying to cut down on 4pence, because that's what the stick actually cost. Each stick of explosive was about 4pence each, and rather than just save 4p, then I thought, no, I'd rather do it by using all explosives. So then climb up through, charge up the holes, put a detonator in each hole, put about 6-7 sticks of explosive in each hole, use a cardboard from a box, or unroll the last stick of explosive, because of course you're charging up holes above your head, and there's always a danger of the explosive slipping back down when you've charged up. So we used to use what we call tamping, and this is really just to ram the explosive up by using, well, what can be explained as a wooden broom hill. That's all it was called a charging stick, but it's no different. And then I would charge up all holes that I drilled. I would then go up with the explosive I got left up to where Dennis was, and then Dennis would pack up drilling. That would be now about 1:15, say, something like that. And then Dennis would come down, we would decide how much more explosive we needed for his holes, how many detonators, whatever, and Dennis then would come down, have a quick cup of tea, I guess, because I didn't watch him, and then he would grab the explosive, the access explosive we needed, the debts we needed, and then Dennis would climb up to where I was, we'd charge up his holes, and our blasting time on bill load on 13 level was 2. And just to give you some idea, our tunnels in Geevor were 100 feet apart, so that meant that 12 level above us, that's 1200 feet, was 2. We was 2. 14 level bill load was 2:30. So it's 5 minutes intervals between each blast. So by now, once we've charged up, we had to cut our fuses to length, because they've got to go off at intervals, otherwise they won't break the ground properly. So once we cut our fuses, they were burning fuses, we would actually then climb up to Dennis's top bench right at the back of the stope, wherever he drilled, the very top bench of the day. And then 2, we had these things, we carried them, they're a bit like Sooty's magic wand, they're called cheesers. They were made by Brock's the firework people, and they were about 10 inches long. And so you cut the end off, you light it with your lighter. It burns for, if I can remember correctly, about 8 to 10 minutes with a little blue flame. So as Dennis now will start to light his fuses, I will be on the bench below him. So as Dennis has lit the top bench, he will squeeze past me, because it's only about 1 metre wide, as I've already said. I would then light the bench above my head. I would then go down the slope, squeeze past Dennis. Dennis would light the next one. So we would alternately light the benches as we were coming down through to the ladder to actually give us access back into 13 level. So I mean, if you've had a good day's drilling, I mean, you could have detonators going off at the back of the stope before you'd actually got out the stope. Although the blast was going forward, I mean, it was safe enough, I guess. And then we would climb down the ladder with the detonators going off, come back to the mossel seat, pick up our bags, and then return back to the station, like I said, about 200 yards from where we were. The KGM would come down, pick us up, take us up with the rest of the miners, and then the van would be there ready to transport us back to Geevor, where the showers all was, and that was it.
Came here in 45. But I wasn't here all that long. I was only here a month or two, and I had my call-up papers. Done my time in the National Service. Came back, well, a couple of years. Yeah.
So what did you do with your first job here then, after your National Service?
Well, after the National Service. Probably was, what we used to call it, mucking out ends of the banjo. Because he was, just after I came back, about 47, that's when the Poles came. And I was mucking most. He was only one mucker here. That was on 9. Everything else was done with the banjo. And that's what we was on. And you had to push and tram them back. And end dumpers. Dump them down. He was dumped in the middle of the track. I never seen no end dumper. The front of it would come up, lift the front back, and you dump then in the middle of the track. Murder they was. And then if you had wet stuff, when you closed the tail, he was a little gap, and this wet stuff would run out. He was murder. Murder on. Yeah.
So when did you start in the Stopes then?
Well, I couldn't say exactly dates, but I was mucking for quite a while. Then I started in the Stopes,
When you say you was mucking in an end, how big a rounds did they drill those days?
Oh, there's 6 feet. But it was a lot of stuff if you just had a banjo to defend yourself.
But I suppose the levels were narrower because they never had, big machinery in.
Well, no, they wasn't a lot. They wasn't a lot different, really. You had good height and width. Yeah, they wasn't a lot.
Oh.
Of course, there was a lot of cross-cutting done in them days. A lot of cross-cutting.
Developing the mine, really.
Yeah.
What was that with Jumbo?
No, they used to have arm and bar.
Oh, that's the old Widowmaker.
The old, they'd put a bar up like that, and then they'd put one across, and your machine would slide, and that was all of them was spanner work. You had to tighten them up, and then you had to slide them across,
Was that dry drilling or wet drilling?
Oh, it was all wet drilling.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that was next on from the Widowmaker, really, what they
Yeah. But I know, I'm pretty certain when I was digging stuff, he was one or two that was drilling dry then. A bit quicker, they thought, You'd see in the white, There's one or two that done that. A bit quicker,
Yeah,
Didn't like
not
water.
healthy.
Didn't like the water flying around.
Trouble is, you're digging yourself in early grave.
Oh, yeah.
Dry drilling.
Yeah. You could see they wasn't, if you're, yourself, if you're up with a peg leg, you're going to get, no matter how good your gear is, you're going to get bit damp, But one or two of them used to do it. You could see because they're all gone now. Yeah.
So getting back to this stuff digging in a stope.
Well, like I was saying, in them times he was underhand stope. The back stope would be a bit more benches than the underhand stope. They would take, more than half of the height, That's the level between 110 feet, isn't it? Roughly. So the back stope would have the highest, But then the underhand stope, you had to dig your stuff because your underhand stope is there like that, and they got your benches in them anyway, and your back stope is there like that. Well, when the back stope had to go on first, and then that had to be dug away there for your stuff, to have open gunners for your underhand stope to go down in. Because if he piled up there, they wouldn't be able to do nothing in the underhand stope.
But underhand stoping was very dangerous, wasn't it? Because you was working on like an open gunnis.
Oh, when you get down the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, when you get down the point, if a drill broke or anything, you could have.
So it was important to be tied on.
Yeah, but I don't know that any other than done it.
No, health and safety wasn't around then.
No.
Or if it was, they ignored things.
Yeah, down the point wasn't very nice.
Yeah.
I know when they blast, quite a bit of that would go over, but they had quite a bit to muck.
To clean your benches off, right?
Yeah, when you think, a blast that's all gone. He wasn't like that. They had to go down with the banjo and
clean away before you start drilling.
Yeah, clean them all off.
But at least backstoping is, you've got clean benches.
Oh yeah.
Barred in a bit of looser ground.
Yeah. I mean, your backstoping you're about 6'6" away, and about the length of a machine plus a starter. About.
Yeah.
And you could reach most anything there, and But when you get away from that underhand stope, you can just imagine you're down that point, and if you hadn't cleaned them down when you was close,
you're a few mile away from this dangerous stuff. Yeah.
And also then, anybody walking through the level, I know they had the pillar always covered them over, but a bit of a gap, anything could have gone through there. You don't take much of a stone to
break a board or anything.
No, he wasn't. That was a dirty job under Anstone. They was wet through all the time. They were wet through.
When I came here, I think it was with Fracky, there was two then. I think Kenny Mitchell was working with somebody over Tweaks, and I went up there and they said, oh, this is under Anstoping, and it was like working on a steep hill, and there was nothing down below them.
Yeah.
And I thought, God, that was dangerous. Like you say, if a steel break and you've got a bit of weight on the machine, you're gone with the drill steel unless you're anchored on somewhere.
Yeah. And I tell you what happened here, well, before I started here, one chap was under Anstoping, and he was piled up down the bottom, and he was piled it up, so he got down on the stuff, off the bench, the point, what we used to call the point. He got off that onto the stuff. He thought it'd be easier to clean them off, and they started tramming it under. Shouldn't have got off the bench, really.
No. So when Stoper now, we say blast today, tomorrow now, he would notify the shift bosses to say to the trammers to pull, he would notify what holes to pull dirt out of?
Well, if you had a chap there as an experienced digger, he would more or less, the machine man would be in charge if he didn't want them gone, you know what I mean? But if he wanted stuff gone, it was usually the digger, if he was experienced, he would more or less take over, like, you know. He'd go down and tell the trammers, look, I want this one. He'd more or less take over, you know. Mind, really, the machine man was in charge. He couldn't overrule the machine man, but they more or less worked together if you had experience.
As long as you had enough height to rig in.
That's right.
So you actually done the rigging in for the Stopers then?
Well,
dug down for the Stopers?
We got them down level. Yeah, got them as level as you could. But then they might not want to get exactly there that day. Well, you work it. I mean, every situation is different. He might have wanted to drill just behind that, so you'd fill in a bit, and then he would blast 2 or 3 benches in him. You know, ideal really. All depends where he wanted to get to. You know, that day.
Seemed very technical compared with development.
Well,
I suppose what you get used to.
It's like everything else. You just get used to it. You know, it's nothing. But one of the problems was we had a load there. I don't know if you might have worked out when you started. The old Coronation. They used to pitch nearly over 45 degrees. Well, he was a blinging nuisance for a machine man because you had to get under that load. And
that's it. Yeah.
You had to get under that load every time.
That's it, because else you'd be tearing into the hanging wall, which you didn't really want to disturb.
Yeah, you had to get under that load, and your machine was over. Well, in one place on 12, he was over at 45 degrees.
Yeah. I mean, between a stoper and a developer, like, you know.
It's a 50-50.
Yeah.
But there again, he had his advantage of the stuff digger, because if that all was hanged up, you could walk over that, you know, if you're experienced enough, you could walk on that foot wall, and you could see the hole has gone through there in the hanging. They always went through in the hanging, where it's a bit rougher stuff. It's a funny thing, when you blasted, all the fine stuff went on the footwall, and the rougher stuff, well, he was rougher like that, but sometimes he was always been hanging. You could walk on the footwall and all had been there, because there was that much pitch, you know. So he was alright for a stuff digger.
Yeah. There wasn't many loads that flat though, were there?
No, that was only one I knew.
I mean,
that was only Coronation on one level. He seemed to have wallowed in that level, and that was the flattest I seen. Oh, they was over quite flat, you know. Yes, he was over like that. Then we had the number 3. He was nearly perpendicular.
It's ideal, that is.
Yeah, he was perpendicular, that one.
So you were of a hang up, like a hang up in the stope. Now that is obviously where the all the broken ground have jammed itself up in the stope.
Exactly. What have happened? You take out a wagon or two, and you open the first 2 wagons, and you go up and have a look, sees he shrunk, and then you're happy, you know what I mean? I was alright now, because he ain't going to hang up no more. Once he start to move, he'll go, you know what I mean? But the problem later on, see, when they started to take these stopes higher, you had to run the 4th and 5th hole, you know.
You've got quite a depth of broken ground there.
Yeah, and you don't know. Well, I'd finished stuff digging then, but they say we've had so many of these. But you don't know whether that funnel has gone up like that, or it might be gone, you know, that bridge across might be hanging away.
You can see the importance of tying yourself on, like working up there, because if that drop, which sometimes it would, you get, just sucked into the dirt like in the broken ground.
But if he hang up, we should try the first night, we put the water on him. Now the water might move, you know. And then what we used to do was they used to be sent down, have a 3-inch pipe, and the blacksmith would put a point on, and you had to drive that down You know?
Well, and put some powder in.
And fill it up with powder, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, fill it up with powder. Give big hit up in there. And fill it up with powder. Try that. But the worst job of the lot was that staffing.
Yeah, I was with Dougie Rowe once, and they had all hung up, and he actually got inside the box, and the stuff was about 30 or 40 foot up, and I was passing him staffs, and he was nailing them on. Obviously, put a bit of powder in the first staff, and then he got up, and I thought, my God, you know, he only got to touch one little rock up there.
Yeah.
He would never get out that box all in time. You know, very dangerous practice, but you can see how difficult it is to clear a hang up.
Yes.
Because you've got to do it, else the stover can't work.
No, that's it. The stove is stopped.
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, he bunged up. He can't do nothing. But then they might have room. They might be lucky enough if they had room. You know, they could drill for a day or two down below that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then they don't always work like that. You know.
No.
You know, perhaps they want to get up the back, like, you know.
That's right. The stover got a certain plan he to work to.
Yeah.
Because, like, I was talking to somebody there, and they don't. They only drill perhaps so many benches a day, but they haven't got to fire those benches. They can have a complete day's drilling.
Yeah, they can.
Just fire so many benches a day.
Yeah.
Of course, they're working with another partner, other side of the stope. You know, other side of the peak. Like, they're working on their own, but they're in a partnership sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there's never two men working side by side.
No.
It's different than a development end.
Yeah. He's all right. And then what we used to do, if he wanted stuff gone, you'd go and do that job first, you know, to get the machine man going, you know.
Can you explain to me about the changing of the rope goes up and down in the shaft?
Well, first of all, it's a special weekend put aside for this operation, for changing the ropes. It's done every 3.5 years. First of all, you pay out the eastern cage and remove it from the shaft. You take it on the shaft bank, and then you connect the end of the rope, which would, during the week, would be a reel, which is on the concrete plat up there now. That will be driven by compressed air, and that would take out the old rope from the winder. When the end of the rope gets off the winder, you then detach it from the winder, disconnect it from the winder, and attach an emp rope to the existing old rope. That is then taken from there over the sheave wheel, and then taken down to the surface or to the cage area, and then reconnected to the new rope, to pull the new rope back onto the electric winder. But prior to that, during the week, Johnny Johnson and his labouring gang would put the new ropes on the steam winder. This is where the new ropes are coming from now. They're coming from the steam winder, and they would put on during the week. And then we would haul that eastern rope back onto the electric winder. The steam winder last worked in 85 for changing the rope. That was driven by compressed air, not steam, and that's how it operated. You pull then against the steam winder and holding the rope taut, and you're pulling against it. You've attached it to the winder, the electric winder, and you haul it in. Western one you can do on its own, because you can clutch out. The western drum or cage can go up and down the shaft on its own without the assistance of the eastern cage. The eastern cage cannot move without the assistance of the western one. So you could disconnect the drums, detach them, and you can freeway or go down to the bottom of the shaft, wherever. Then you do the same with the western drum. And then the ropes would be attached, the new connection was made to the rope from the fitting shop. And that would have to be left 4.5 hours to cool down, and then you start then taking your marks. You're lost now, you're lost with all the marks. The only reference you've got is the big pointer on the dial. That will give you some indication of where you are, but you can be 6 or 8 feet out. So what we normally do is Eric Gale and Norman Barnacote, they're the shaft men, they would get on top of the cage, put the flat tops rather. They will go down and give you the marks. What you do, you go down, and when the big pointers come into start very slowly, that one of them can get off the cage and ring the bell and stop you, and ring you to the appropriate position. lining up the bottom of the cage with the rails or the track mat level. And that is done on every level, down to 16, down to skip hole. That is done both sides. So your job then is to put the new marks on the flange of the drum in chalk. So you rub out the old ones, and sometimes they can't spawn one with the other. One is coming on top of the other, so you'd have to try and manipulate them a little bit. In doing that, within 24, 48 hours, their marks are going to be lost again because of the stretching of the rope. Once you start hoisting, the rope starts to stretch. And over a period of his life, it will stretch something in the region of 25 to 30 feet. Okay, so you know, each driver knows the eastern, the western obviously is to the west, Levant side, and the eastern one is facing the south. So you don't have the east and west on the drums, you just put the marks in, S for surface, T for tip, and the 3, 5, whatever, all the levels down through the shaft. And then you also have to have clutch marks, so that when you go to hoist main, you can line them up and get them up. Little marks you put on your drum and chalk, and that serves right throughout the period of the life of the rope. So you've got surface 16, which is men riding. You also got B16, which is bottom 16 for hoisting. Neither will suit one another. Yes, you could go men riding from B16, you could do that, but you couldn't hoist on surface 16 because you'd be down the bottom of the shaft. So that's virtually what it's about. And then the fitter will come in and set up the little controllers. These are the governors. You know where they are in the glass cases in the winders. He's got to make sure that the winder trips out in its given point in each section of the shaft. He's got surface men, and he's got material men, and he's got rock stopping. And these got to be done several times. So you've got 3 points in the headgears, and he's got to make sure, do them several times, and making sure that the winder cuts out in the same place each time, because he's got to sign the book to say that he's responsible for the position. Those in the glass cases, they're the governors. They control your speed and distance of travel and where you'll travel. You've got 2 braking systems on the winder. One is a slow braking system, which if he cuts out in the middle of the shaft, it takes about 100 feet to stop. But in the last 300 feet, where it's slowly down, normally it's slowing down, it stops dead. And that is then done on the eastern side of the headgear, surface headgear to the tip, and then you've got the bottom on the eastern side to do. You've got surface bottom, not surface, men bottom, rock bottom, so on. And you've got also to do the other side, the western side. So that can take up to an hour and a half, couple of hours, because he's got to make sure that winder trips out in the same spot each time. It's measured. It's a measured distance. That you're only permitted to have 2'6", 2'8", or something like that to allow it to trip. So it's got to trip out in that same position each time. So that's virtually all about the changing the ropes. But over a period of time, the rope will stretch about 25 to 30 feet in his lifetime. Like I said, the heaviest part is the hoisting the dirt. I come here one night shift, and we changed the ropes the previous weekend, and it might have been Monday or Tuesday night I got up, and so far, and that was it. Couldn't go any farther. It stops you. You can't do anything about it. The only thing you can do, if it's the bottom that's tripping you out, you've got to look at the cams on each governor to see what is happening. And if the bottom has tripped you out, you can lift it up, because the bottom's gone too far down. That's tripped you out, so you can lift it up 6 inches or whatever to overcome that. But if the top is tripping out, then you've got to call the fitter into it. When you lift off the bottom, you've got 2 tons skip empty. You've got the rope, which is 3 or 4 tons. You've got 2 tons of dirt in them. Normal, you could have 2.5 tons of dirt. Depends on the material. I mean, if it's rock, you want to throw it underweight. I mean, if it's damp and go down, boom, then you could have 3 tons in that. But there's a limit to what it will lift. So that's virtually about changing the rope. But it is a nightmare for us, because every day, every shift, you've got to change the marks on the drum. You go down and stop on your given point, because you stop the mark on the flange of the drum level with a pointer. That's the mark they've given you, and you could be down a foot too low, but it's up to the cageman then to tell you that you're too low, you can't get in or get out or whatever. And you rectify it there and then. Or he gives you the new mark, he brings you up 4 and 1 to lift up and gives you a signal to say that's right. Then you put the new mark on.
So how often do you cut a piece of rope off the end?
That's done every 6 months. The severe end of the rope, the final end of the rope, is what gets all the pounding from the rocks and stuff like that.
No.
The king hook is sent away in 6 months to be overhauled. And you had 4 king hooks, I think. Each king hook would have its own capel, an own bolt, all numbered, that they stay one with another.
Yeah.
You don't mix them up. But Donald Harris will tell you that. Donald was very familiar with all that sort of thing. Because Donald was in charge of the king hooks and to send them away to Wales and stuff like that. Virtually about that.
So when you cut 6 foot off, put the new king hook on,
Yeah.
do you do a test then?
No, you have to put the new marks in again because you've taken away 6 foot. So what you would do, go down there, and virtually 6 or 8 feet is about the depth of the cage. So you then, like as if you put on the top of the cage down level with it, and they will give you the marks. So each time there's interfered, the rope was being changed or taken out or anything like that, you have to put in new marks again.
Yeah.
Back in the old days when they done the compliance test, and then they found out that it's quicker and easier to put in a wagon of sand or a wagon of gravel or whatever, which represents about a ton. So that's to do with the compliance test, which is done annually. Once the rope was installed, on a weekly basis, the rope is oiled. On a Monday afternoon, the rope is oiled. They used to stand over the shaft there and oil the rope as it's going down. Okay, but they found later it was more convenient to come inside and oil
On the drum?
On the drum itself, yeah. And when that's done, especially this time of year, you see cobwebs of oil going away as it's leaving the drum, which isn't ordinary oil. You have it examined every week. Donald Harris would examine it every, not quite day, what day it would be, but it would be examined every week. And you will go down, he was standing in the headgear, or in the shafty area, in the headgear area, and he would examine that rope. You stop every couple 100 feet, and he would measure the rope. And I recall here, when it went to change over to metric, that the metric rope was slightly thicker than the imperial rope, and they found that the rope had a flat side on it, that it wasn't resting in the groove. And what they did then, had a company in one weekend to grind out the sheave wheels, and they found that they ground them out that much so that the spoke was showing. So they had to change the sheave wheels. Now, I'm not sure what year that was. It was in the 70s, I think. Mid to late 70s that was done. There's a lot of caretaking. I mean, you've got men's lives in them all the time.
Yeah.
You're the driver, you're listening to it all the time, you're listening to it as much as you're looking at it. And if you hear a crack somewhere, then you will report that and you will come back and examine it to see where it's cracked. If it's on the turnover, that's where it will be, on the turnover. When you've gone out with one layer and you start the second one, that's the turnover from one layer to the next. Now if the turnover, and that's got to be positioned exactly so that it comes over. I mean, you're traveling 25 feet a second. So that has to be positioned exactly. But I don't ever recall having any problems with Victory Mine. The rope, changing the rope, done every 3.5 years. Every 12 months you do a compliance test, and that consists of the guy coming here with his machine, and he sets it up. It is then connected to the eastern drum, via like a bicycle chain with a cog, which is put in from here, is kept here, and is put in, bolted to the chassis of the winder, and that is connected, and that will monitor the speed and distance, whatever, and that he'll record that. So you start off by he connects the machine up. You go down. He will set up the governors, the lily controllers, that you have an artificial landing, which means the landing isn't down 16, is up between 14 and 15. You can't go any farther. The governors have been changed. They've set up. He's been set that they don't go any farther. They won't come in much further, third level. So you're going to do a lot of racing around in this procedure. He will then have a ton weight put in the cage, which consists of a wagon full of gravel, sand, whatever, which represent a ton. He will then take you down or ask you to drive that eastern cage down nearly to 15, or nearly to the artificial land, let it round off. He will then ask you to give it power to push it down. See what happens.
Yeah.
He then brings you up 2 or 3 levels. But the problem is when you get up to around 11 level, you're way out. altogether. It gets to a point he's up to maximum speed. You're inclined to put the brake on. You've got a ton weight in this one wing. And he comes into an overspeed. The concrete comes off the wall plate on there. I reckon he does more damage in that session doing that compliance test than 12 months driver. It's definitely. I've heard Billy Oates say that they saw the sheet move ground once after it stopped.
Preceding the coke, we had the oil furnaces, and that went on till 1957 to 58 when we had a new manager called Mr. Batchelor. Now, when he came in that, they had new ideas because he came from South Africa. They had tungsten tip drills being brought in. Now, previously, working as they used to do up till the 1958-60, the miners underground, we used to sharpen about 600 drills a day in that blacksmith shop between the 9 of us. There was 600 drills a day being sharpened. So I can say that was quite a lot of drills. Well, then when they introduced the tungsten tip, I had to go to Truro, go to Allman's in Camborne to learn the process of sharpening these steels. And I went up there for a week. I did either a week, but it was just over a week to how to sharpen these steels. Well, from then on, they proceeded to improve their technique or improve the style of sharpening of the way the miners used their drills. So they made a change over then from being sharpened in each sharpening and all like that. It was be sharpened by carborundum wheels to sharpen these tungsten tips. And instead of sharpening 600 drills a day, there was only one person needed. And out of the 9 persons that was working there, when I was previously, at the old way that they used to work, I was the only one that was left. I was the only one doing the sharpening. I took a job of 9, and the amount of drills that I used to sharpen really could have been maybe about 50 or 60 a day instead of 600. So it really reduced the work amount. I used to do that, plus I used to have to the wagons that you use underground, the clamps that used to keep the wheels on, have to be repaired. I used to, being having a bit of spare time, I used to have to straighten some of those out for another department. So I had a couple of jobs. But sharpening these here drill steels caused problems for me. That's part of the reason really why I get rheumatism arthritis now. Because when we started off, we had to use a machine, and it was water had to go on to this end of this bit to keep it cool so that it wouldn't burn the edge of the bit, cause problems. So during the winter time, I got a lot of water on my hands, and working near the door as well, and my hands used to be freezing cold. And I used to, after 5 or 10 minutes, I used to have to go down to the furnace, forge, and I had to dry my hands and warm my hands, and then come back again. Because, well, that went on, but then things improved because as time went on, we had gloves with a plastic coating so that water wouldn't get through. Another thing which occurred, and they had earmuffs and that for the sound of sharpness to protect our ears. And we also, we sharpened these steels with the water and whatever, the stuff that was coming off the grinding process to protect your health. See, because it was improving your health as well. We had to use a face mask. So it finished up that I used to have to have gloves, a face mask to protect my lungs from dust, and probably earmuffs for the sound, to protect my ears. Because I did put in a claim. I had £2,000 claim from Geevor for damaged ears from the previous way of working in the blacksmith shop because of the sound. Working with the old system, mostly when we used to speak to one another, it was lip reading. Couldn't exactly hear what we was speaking because of the sound of the two blast furnaces and all that, you could tell what people were saying really by reading their lips. So we had to lip read most of the time previously. Then, see, I mean, as things improved, we had all these here different things brought in for to help our health out, like, you know. But the one thing that happened there, the miners weren't very helpful in that. When they used to drill their rounds underground, there used to be two ways of mining underground, which is driving the shafts, and other part is called searching for the lodes and drilling out the lodes where the tin was in. Well, the ones who used to drive in what we would call an 8-foot round, to blast that round out, they had to drill in the centre first. To blast out a piece in the centre, about the foot square, so that when they blast out the remainder, it had somewhere to collapse into. Because if you didn't do that, when you blasted something, complete object, the ground wouldn't break very well, would it? Because it didn't have nowhere for it to go. So what they did, the machine men, they used to have two levels to work. So one day they were going one level, drill around, which is 8 foot deep, and could be about 8 foot square or whatever the size of the level that they was going in, and then they would drill in the centre, and then they would shift all their gear into the next level that they was working. They would blast what they call the cut. They would blast the centrepiece out today. When they leave work, they would blast out the centre and leave it. Now tomorrow they wouldn't be able to go in there because they had this other part of the round to come out. So the next day then, they would go into the next place where they had to work, do the same amount of drilling, blast that cut, and his other partner would go over and blast the round then over on the other side. So they could work every day. Previously to that, it was faster working. Otherwise, by the way they was working previously, they would take 2 days in one place to blast out one round, and that is they was 1 day on the loose. But by working two ends, what we call it, they was being able to blast every day, to work every day, and to go on continually. See? So that was what they used to do. Well, they used to have blasts in centrepiece. They used to have a 3-inch bit and drill 6 holes for to blast this out. And every day they used to drill, these drills used to be brought up, there used to be a screw-on system, a shank drill used to be on the end of the shank. And I used to have to drive out the bit so that I could sharpen the bit on the wheel. But of course the men used to over drill. The end of these here pieces of the drilling out these here rounds used to be a tapered shank, and used to finish up about 8 wide in the front. Well, they used to force them, and instead of finishing up like that there, they used to come in that sometimes they weren't more than about 1/4 inch round, because they used to be the ordinary steel used to be going against the rock and used to be wearing away and collapsing. Well, anyhow, one day they brought out drills in that there, and one of these here drills was in about 1/4 inch. I used to have to put this on a hole in the anvil and knock this piece out to get to the bit. And in doing so, a piece of that end broke off and went in my knee. And I got it there now. And that is, I can safely see that piece of steel. I feel it there now. That went through my overalls, through my trousers, and into my leg. Well, I suppose I've had that in my leg for about 20 years. But coming back to the old-fashioned way of working, when my stepbrother was working, he used to work down Levant, when Levant was working during the First World War. Now, he used to be machining himself, and he used to work down Levant Mine, and he used to walk from Levant Mine up underneath the lighthouse, and 1/2 a mile out under the sea, and they could hear the boulders on the seabed as they was working. And the system that they used to work, they only used to have a calico trousers, which was a very thin trousers, because they never had any ventilation and it was so hot. And they used to work in pairs, and One would go in wherever they was working now, and he would work for half an hour, hand drilling, and whichever way they used to work those days, hand drilling the holes for blasting out the tin and that. And he worked for half an hour, and he would come back, I don't know how far back, but he would come back so far, and he would lie in a pool of water and his mate used to go in and take over from him. And every half hour they used to change over like that, and that was a system that they used to work down at Levant, that the machine man used to work. So it shows the 3 or 4 systems from working like that down Levant to the finished stage that they had using tungsten tip drills. And
Stoping was that you actually worked the load between the 2 levels, and you started off, we'll say, on 14 and you worked to 30, and it involved putting up raises, which was raise hole into the roof of the tunnel, then driving what they called inters, which were the driveways between each one, and then from there you would start stoping it out so that your actual stope would look like the underside of a stairs where you had benches. And each day you would drill so many benches and blast them, and as the stuff built up in your stope, you would then have the trammers remove that stuff from wood chutes which had been put in the raise holes. You had to be very careful to make sure that you cleaned down at the start of your shift, because you could get large rocks, sides, roof, and you had to make sure that before you started work the next day that you went through and cleaned it all loose or down, otherwise you could end up getting a rather large piece come down on you. And machines were Ullman's Silver 3s, what they called a peg leg, and these had an extendable leg which when you started drilling the leg would telescope out and push your drill up into the roof as you were drilling. When I first started you were paid by the fathom, and every 4 weeks you would get measured with surveyors, and they would mark where you'd come from and measure to where you got to, and then they would estimate the amount of ore that had been broke within that area. What we'd do was we would try and drill, we used to say 40 holes a day each man, but if we drilled any more that was a bonus. You could drill for 2 days. We used to fire every day because the trouble with not firing was that you would close yourself up, but you couldn't get yourself out of somewhere to work. I was actually the last one to use safety fuses. I think everybody else got a little bit bored